Alrighty then, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in. If you're joining now or for the first time, you haven't seen us before, welcome. We're really excited about this. How you guys doing? Good morning.
Doing great.
Morning.
Fantastic. So today we're going to be talking about migration from legacy tools to Transcend, a customer story around a $12 billion FinTech journey from OneTrust to Transcend specifically. So if you have any questions, please don't be afraid to shoot them in the chat. We're here to talk to everybody. So without further ado, my name is Cameron Ivey. I'm marketing manager over at Transcend here. I'm alongside Gregory Jourdan. He's the lead solutions architect at Transcend, and Jake Ottenwaelder. He's the principal privacy engineer at Integrated Privacy. Gentlemen, thanks so much for taking the time to be with me today.
Absolutely.
It's always the best day when I get to hang out with you, Cameron. You know that.
I know, and you're getting busy, man, which is good. I love to hear that. Working with a lot of customers and companies, helping with their privacy. You're doing the fractional privacy engineering thing. How's that going for you?
It's been going pretty well. It's been interesting, kind of forging like my own marketplace, so to speak. But yeah, it's been a lot of work, but excited to kick back and share some of the experience that we've had and some of the successes that we've ran into.
And for those that are tuning in, again, this is such a great opportunity with these two gentlemen who work with customers with our next gen solution, where we can talk to you about certain things. If you're still using a legacy tool, or you just have questions, you're curious about how that migration process kind of happens coming from an older tool to something a little bit more modern. That's what we're going to kind of go through today to make it a little bit seem a little less intimidating, I guess. Again, Jake and Greg, let's go ahead and talk about the agenda. So we're going to go through some challenges and limitations when it comes to legacy tools, just to go high level, benefits of migrating off of legacy to next gen privacy solutions. We'll talk with Jake about his migration process and step by step and what that looks like. We'll also talk about some strategies for completing a legacy migration, and we'll also do an inside look with the product itself. Greg will take us through that and our Transcend Consent Management tool. So again, questions and all that kind of stuff, please shoot them our way at any time. We're happy to jump to the side and answer anything. So without further ado, gentlemen, let's give a little backstory, Jake. I know we see a little picture here, something that you kind of created and we kind of, souped up a little bit. But when we're talking about challenges and limitations, can you kind of give us a high level of what we're looking at here and what your brain went through when you were putting this together?
Yeah, it's really hard to figure out how to communicate just the differences between legacy privacy solutions and next generation solutions. What really ends up happening is that there's a lot of work that's done from like the code level that people just from a high level can't really understand or completely figure out. And a lot of it does end up being like just hidden through like trade secrets and whatnot. But when we look at like the legacy tools, and what this diagram is kind of showing is that the legacy cookies consent solutions really kind of are this third party exterior to your organization. Whether it's user-centrics or OneTrust, your consent management is really going to sit on the outside of your security platform and application, and it's going to have to ping into your application, and there's not a lot of overall visibility or kind of confidence and trust that somebody would have in this consent platform. It's not very, very well integrated. And that really just lacks clarity. It makes it a lot harder to do credentialed privacy scans. It just keeps everything kind of outside or almost at like an arm's length. Yeah.
What kind of challenges does that impact, like a company's ability to maintain compliance or adapt to some of the regulatory changes?
Well, yeah, you have two different areas that are really changing, right? You have your application, which, if you're a functioning business, is
Right.
always going to be changing. Any e-commerce, fintech, nonprofit always has application code that's changing consistently. Um, it's just so to keep on top of those changes, but also keep on top of the regulatory changes as well. It's kind of this two-sided changing marketplace in kind of your applications. So when you have a tool that is exterior to your application, you're very limited in what sort of integrations and how much control you have over that application platform. So it's hard to maintain changes. It's hard to just keep up to date with regulations and make sure that the changes that you are making in your consent management platform are actually being affected and effective on your application.
Yeah. Any points there, Greg, that you can add, maybe from some experience or stories from customers you worked with?
Yeah, I mean, I think like part of what we're like describing here is the way that most of these solutions will work is just kind of do an inventory manually on your own of the technologies you believe are running on your website, and just kind of do a course level tagging of all of these trackers and all of these scripts and the pixels and whatnot. And that kind of infers, like Jake is saying, a separate maintaining process that just is very manual and just audit based, and you kind of need to be on top of doing recurring scans and tagging every so often when you just look from the outside and try and list what's running on the website.
Yeah.
I mean, Greg, you actually brought in a good point that I didn't bring up, but the data flows side of it. So with Transcend's platform specifically, they look at cookies and data flows as two separate almost entities, right? Data flows is something that Transcend offers out of the box and is super easy to implement, consistent with how they implement cookies as well. Other legacy tools, because there's that separation, can't actually implement data flows the same way and has to rely on a third-party system like Google Tag Manager to actually regulate those data flows.
So to add on to that, why is there such a need for any company to transition from, a legacy tool to something more agile like Transcend?
Yeah, I mean, kind of touched on this, but yeah, the regulatory landscape is changing. Your applications are changing. Leveraging a old legacy kind of tool is going to make overall development a lot harder. It's going to make your auditing process harder. It's going to make regulation harder. It just requires a lot more effort to maintain these kind of systems versus having a tool that operates and can just kind of work. And it's a lot of times clients are just like amazed that it just kind of works. And that's what I've experienced, at least.
Nice. And before we move on to the next slide here, Jake, or I'm sorry, Greg, do you have anything else that you wanted to add before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, so if we want to get just a tiny bit more into the details of what it looks like in terms of the data flows versus the kind of old gen script tagging technology, the way we look at this is, so in the other consent managers and GTM and things like that, Google Tag Manager, you will usually most likely tag scripts, entire scripts, tracking scripts from a vendor with different processing purposes, whether they do analytics and things like that. And the way we look at this is we separated the data flows and the cookies largely because, I mean, semantically they're different things, but they also are being regulated very different ways. So cookies, other solutions might also show you, here are the various cookies that are on your website, and we can do that. We can tag them, we can regulate them. The data flows are literally the network requests that are going to be happening on your website. And therefore, we don't just look at, oh, are you loading a script from a vendor? But we look at, here are all the network requests that this script is doing to this vendor. And now you know exactly what the script is doing, when it's calling home, where it's going, what type of APIs, and you can kind of triage that separately, as opposed to just, I know there is a script on my website, I want to give that entire script classification, and that's the end of it.
Nice. And obviously we'll be able to show a little bit of that, I would imagine, at the end.
Mm-hmm.
To kind of put that into a visual for everyone. But let's go ahead and move on to our next slide. So benefits of migrating to Transcend Consent Management. What are some of the strategic benefits that Transcend offers compared to legacy privacy solutions?
Well, I can say, I guess, from a strategic side, when we look at time to implementation, I think that's a key piece, right? With this FinTech solution migrating from OneTrust to Transcend, I was able to work with the engineering team, and we were able to remove OneTrust and implement Transcend's air gap and have it fully regulating within 2 weeks. When we look at other, and this was just with a single domain, pretty straightforward. When we look at other solutions, there's other customers that I work with that have one web domain and multiple mobile apps. Full implementation across all of those systems takes anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks, versus with like OneTrust, it's going to take upwards of like 12 weeks. So from a strategic standpoint, if we're looking at risk, if we're trying to understand resource allocation, it's a lot easier to sell a 2-week, 4-week, 6-week sprint versus 3-month, 4-month, 5-month kind of sprint. So I think that's a big call out, and I don't think people really understand how easy this actually can be. Consent management can be.
And that's a good point. When you guys are working with customers every day, is that the typical worry from project managers or people trying to transition? Is that their worry that it's going to take too long, it's going to take too many resources, that kind of thing?
Partially, I would say, yeah. The implementation, obviously, and the level of effort, the technicality, the resources from engineering team that would be required is definitely a worry. I'll say the thoroughness and the reliability of the protection and the consent compliance that's offered it's also a big upside and a big focus. And that's one of the upsides, the strategic upsides of looking into our solution, is for both the granularity. So granularity offers you what I was talking before about for you some maximum business yield in terms of the data that you actually can afford to let through when you offer compliance on some other API calls potentially. And then the reliability and the safety, it's because of, it's frankly a very, the solution itself is extremely technical and extremely powerful in that it works at the network level in a very, almost firewall-like kind of way, where we're really going to see what happens, and where you're going to be able to pop that up in your triaging to see exactly what kind of network calls are done, and that at the end of the day we'll stop them if they need to be stopped. So it's also very good for peace of mind for the legal team.
Yeah.
Yep. So what I tell my customers is you can have, so there are 3 main points to any kind of purchase, any kind of project, right? You can get any kind of project done fast, you can get it done cheap, or you can get it done well. And most of the time you can only choose 2 out of the 3. 2 out of the 3 is kind of what I aim for. If you're hitting all 3, there's either probably something wrong, someone's overselling you on it, or we got to be a little bit more, look into it a little bit more. If you're only getting 1 out of those 3, or 0, then it's not a good quality product, right? So you can choose 2 out of the 3. You can get it done fast and you can get it done well, but you might have to sacrifice on cost. Or when it comes to OneTrust, I mean, the price is very low when it comes to their consent management solution, but you might not be getting it done super fast, and the quality might not be as great. So I really, when you look at from a pricing standpoint, especially with like OneTrust software, if you have such a high risk kind of landscape, right? Consent management is a very high risk, high visibility landscape for your application. You shouldn't really be cheaping out at that final stage when it's very easy for somebody to audit, very easy for somebody to follow up and start cracking the whip on you.
Cracking the whip. Sorry, I'm a goofball. Anyways, you guys both brought up a good point that I'm going to throw a curveball at you, because I think going back to what you said, Greg, about how it's a very technical solution behind the scenes. And, not to say that legacy tools aren't technical. What makes Transcend so different in terms, and it kind of goes along with Jake, your kind of picture here that you've put together, which is so nice. Like what makes Transcend such an attractive approach when it comes to using our privacy and consent management tool compared to others?
Yeah. So yeah, it's twofold. It's from the way the solution works, it's like we said before, a classic kind of tag-based consent management will only offer you the level of granularity that you have from listing a bunch of scripts that are running on your website and saying this script can be loaded when consent is provided, this one script cannot be loaded. And that's about the end of it in terms of the solutions level of technicality and complexity. And with us, it's a lot more, our script is on your website. Here is everything that happens on your website. Here are all the network requests. Here are all the cookies, associated vendors, like we know this request is going to Facebook and things like that. And now that's a good picture. Like now you're able to really distinguish, and not only distinguish but classify and trust, because this is just network request. And at the end of the day, we patch a whole lot of different protocols that are happening on the website, so that no network request, no modification on your page, etc., is unchecked. And so that's much more reliable and granular. And in terms of the ease of use, it's like we said, your dashboard, we'll see that in a little bit, will show you everything that's been detected and everything that actually happens on your website, with some information about where it is and how much there is, etc. And provided that you're able to distinguish, a call to api.facebook.com, and not to mention them again, and then Google and etc. and so on, all those things, you just have to actually tag them like you would probably in a different solution, but now at just a much more granular level, and you've done most of the work that's done to let us do the regulation after that.
Yeah, I think the key thing here is the difference between a tool that was built like by engineers versus a tool built by lawyers. Let's just call it as a fact, right? As an engineer, my goal is to make magic happen, right? I want the non-technical people to look at what I build and be amazed that it's actually functioning, and have a decent enough knowledge to be able to check it and to be able to manage it, but not too much knowledge to where they need to understand the inner workings of the tool. That's what, as an engineer, as somebody who focuses on automation, that's kind of my role. Transcend hits that perfectly, where you don't need to know, from the user interface perspective, you don't need to know all the inner workings to be able to make it run well. It works kind of like magic, and that's the goal for implementing or just having a tool that is well developed, is that it just will work, and you could just hit a checkbox and a bunch of other stuff happens. You don't need to know all the different things that happen after you hit that checkbox. You don't need to know how it happens. You need to know why it happens, but you don't need to know how it all happens. But it just you just flip the checkbox. You flip the category. That's the value of having like a well engineered kind of product.
Yeah, love that. You guys just made a lot of great points. Appreciate that. So that kind of brings us to some of your actual process to that magic, along with the tool itself, of course. But Jake, what are some of the steps involved in your process for transitioning a company from that first gen to a next gen platform like Transcend?
Yep. So this is kind of my migration process. Again, it actually aligns very closely with my overall integrative privacy approach. First step is always understanding your surroundings, analyzing your surroundings, or looking over the scoping. I think it's impossible. Every privacy program is unique to that organization. You can't just drag and drop a new program into an existing organization and expect it to work. There has to be some melding of company culture. There has to be some understanding as to what the overall processes are in the organization. And that's where the scoping and understanding the current landscape of the privacy program is really helpful. The next piece is really identifying the data in my methodology, but also the categorization element of it. Categorizing in Transcend is really easy. You have categorizations in both cookies and data flows. The categorization in Transcend is unique in that you can actually apply the same tag to multiple. You can apply multiple tags to the same data flow. Other way around. Sorry, you can apply multiple tags to the same data flow or cookie. That's really valuable in other applications where you might have to create an entire new processing category, or it just blanket a GPC signal will just blanket opt out of all analytics and advertising. With Transcend, you really have a lot more control over if something is purely used for analytics versus analytics and sale of information. So going through that categorization process is super valuable. I actually end up having to work with IT or legal to look at what contracts the company has, because Transcend 9 clients out of 10 has uncovered technology on people's websites or mobile apps that don't have contracts or don't have IT or shadow IT or whatever is kind of going on. The Transcend system identifies things that probably shouldn't be there, and so we have to go through that categorization effort with legal or IT.
Like no owner, no knowledge that the tracker was running on the website, things like that.
Yeah. Which is, again, shows kind of this value proposition that we didn't really talk about before, right? If our goal is only doing consent management, then yeah, there are other tools that just do consent management. Again, not as well, but then you get into this added value of, okay, you're actually being able to audit the website and making sure that somebody said we're doing a temporary program with Nextdoor or temporary advertising with any kind of ad tech platform. You're able to make sure and monitor, okay, when was this put on? When was this taken off? And making sure and holding people accountable for that. After the categorization, we get to deployment. So at the deployment stage, testing and validation with Transcend is super easy. They provide the ability to actually override local action on the air gap script. So within your browser console, you can actually interact with Transcend's air gap script on your device which makes testing and validation a lot easier. That's something that I've not seen any other consent management platform offer.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but that's a good point. Just in case for this, they're actually viewing, what is air gap? Can you guys give the viewers a little bit of background on what air gap is?
Yeah, can you go back a slide? And then, yeah, Greg, if you want to go over it.
Yeah, well, so it's literally our kind of one-stop shop for what you need on your website for our regulation to happen. So it is one script that will be loading with your options, with your personal URL, or two URLs. We have staging and a production environment scripts. And this script, so long as it is loaded on every one of your pages as early as possible so that we can, help you regulate everything else down the line. It contains both the telemetry, the information that we gather on what exactly is running on your website so that you can do your triage, but it also does the showing of the banners whenever that's applicable so that folks can opt out. And then it also does the patching of all those methods, those network requests, the deletion of the cookies, everything that's basically the regulation. So it's really the one script that you need on your website to install, and potentially barring some very like footer links and things like that, potentially that's the only line of code that you need to put on your website, and then we're doing everything in the dashboard.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jake, go back in. Appreciate that.
No, great call out. It's it's on that side. It's essentially just the magic tool, magic button that you just add to your software. So,
Which is, I would say that's probably one of the biggest differentiators from all other tools, wouldn't you say? One of?
Yeah, just that you're able to implement it, like I said, super quickly. I mentioned this before, but yeah, a OneTrust implementation can take up to 12 weeks at the fastest, and that's with a team who knows what they're doing and has implemented this before. It can take 2 weeks, if not sooner than that, if not. So it's just, it's night and day kind of difference. And like I said, everything else is able to be managed in the dashboard. Configuration changes, regional changes, all that stuff that Greg will be able to walk through a little bit later.
Perfect.
So deployment and testing and validation, super quick, super easy. Like I said, you just can go into your browser console and start making updates and managing and changing around the air gap configurations. And then deployment and go live is as simple as just switching a toggle on the dashboard. Again, no code changes that needs to get pushed out. Once the air gap script is loaded onto your page, you really don't need engineering support anymore. So when we look at level of effort across different teams, if your engineering resources are tight, you really don't need their support anymore after the initial air gap deployment loading onto the page, which happens early on. So after deployment, we get into this kind of maintenance phase. This is where my expertise, I try to share my experience and work on the system, how to make sure and understand troubleshooting or bugs. That's where kind of this ongoing maintenance support happens. So super straightforward. We offer a lot of great insight and documentation, but overall maintenance is very easy as well. It just continues to operate and run on the platform, and a lot of times we just see a kind of quarterly review of data flows to make sure that they're still consistent and no other issues happening.
Awesome. So let's move on to the next slide here. So essential strategies for completing a migration from legacy providers. So how does the company communicate the need for change and kind of secure that buy-in from key stakeholders during a migration? What are some of the things that you guys have worked with on various customers? What are some of the key points that kind of stick out to you?
Yeah, communication side, we focus a lot on the overall time to deployment. We focus on risk mitigation, and we focus on level of effort across different engineering teams or different teams in the organization. All of those are really valuable to understanding just the value that Transcend provides over other tools. That's kind of the main focus that we bring in for stakeholder buy-in, and it again works really well when you're able to show these like very specific metrics around implementation.
What are some of the steps that are taken to kind of map that out during the migration process?
Yeah, we focus on providing kind of gap analysis, and again, this is where we have to go into kind of the integrative approach of understanding the context and analyzing your surroundings of what is the overall appetite of the organization for risk, what kind of data are we working with, how public facing is the organization. There's a lot of different areas that we discuss when we look into kind of gap analysis for this. But when at the end of the day, going through looking at just specifically what Transcend offers, the overall risk mitigation, the data mapping, cleansing, and that auditing portion that goes beyond kind of what you would normally just pay for a solution, where you're now able to see all these changes that are happening on the application. Those are where we really try to drive home the overall value and help the customer kind of find the right solution for their needs.
Yeah, and one last point here, this can be for both of you, but how do we help kind of address potential like resistance or change? I'm sure that there's been that type of conversations from customers or onboarding customers where they're worried about change or certain processes. How do you guys handle that?
Yeah, I deal a lot with integration phase and post sale, right? But the things that we look at usually when we get started is existing solution, friction points, kind of how did you get here, and what is your main the main benefit that you're trying to get from this implementation, and the main problem you're trying to solve. And so it can go from just actual litigation being in progress because of some technology that wasn't properly regulated, some consent preferences that weren't well honored, to the pain of actually using the legacy tools, the having to keep on top of adding new script and tracking technologies on your website, and the difficulty it is to not only catch on them, but classify them, maybe create new original experiences is also oftentimes a pain point. I think I'm answering a bit more about the previous thing that we were talking about. But in terms of resistance, I think the main thing is actually establishing how much engineering resources are required to implementing this new tool, and how much effort the integration is going to be. And like we said before, the deployment of our technology is extremely simple. The definition of the use cases and the regions and the classification, etc., can be largely non-technical. The only remaining activities that we would hope to have some engineering support for is potentially some of the classification. If we detect a bunch of network requests that are being made to your internal systems or to some sort of APIs that engineering can have some advice into to identify, and then largely just testing, making sure that the website works perfectly well. Because, like, again, it's a very powerful solution. So you do want to make your triage properly and know what to expect, because we have the ability to just stop any sort of network request. So you don't want to start tagging one of your internal services with something that can be opted out of that wouldn't work. Yeah, that's really the main ones.
Yeah, I would also, other friction points are just around, like, there's a lot of other players in the space that are trying to make consent a lot harder, which is very frustrating. I know Greg and I are working on developing better integrations with Shopify, which has started to lock down like all of their consent options, and trying to almost like monopolize some of the data flows and consent options that are on their platforms and for any of their customers. So this is for any application that's using Shopify. or any customer using Shopify. So that's been another kind of friction point of Transcend is the superior technology to anything that Shopify could offer, and Transcend offers a lot better functionality in auditing and managing it, but a friction point around like how do we best keep everybody kind of happy, and Transcend already has operated and has an amazing API documentation, GraphQL integrations as well that offer just great extensibility from the Transcend platform to other tools. While that is a friction point, it's something that was easily able to be overcome.
Yeah, we do work regularly with other frameworks that are trying to provide some amount of consent regulation. Oftentimes, when you're rub against these, you're using some sort of platform like Shopify or Google Tag Manager that at some point might kind of twist your arm and tell you need to deal with us to do some of your consent regulation. And so in these cases, we know those frameworks. We know Google Consent Mode, Facebook LDU. There is some integrations with Vimeo, and we're looking at Shopify as well, and all those things. And we try and make sure you have some hooks and you have a way to do whatever bit of the compliance you feel like you have to with Google Consent Mode or Shopify, etc. But as far as we're concerned, at the end of the day, we'll see everything. So long as our script is on your pages, we'll see the network request, and we can provide you with that protection no matter what.
We're always looking.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's great. Both of you making, I mean, that's the best part about this is just the experience that you guys get on the ground with customers with that kind of information. That's awesome. So again, if you guys have any questions that are viewing right now, we'd love to hear from you if you have any. If not, hope you're enjoying it. Let's go ahead to the last slide here, and then we'll jump into the product. So these are some of our highlights and capabilities and features. You guys see anything on here that's not noted that you might want to mention, or just if you want to highlight some of these and kind of dig into them before we get into the product, feel free.
Yeah. We touch on a lot of these already. I think the one thing that came to mind for me is that obviously we're presenting the simplest, fastest integration where you might drop the script, figure out what your regions are and what purposes apply, tag your tracking technologies, go live, preferably. But there are all sorts of subcases and capabilities that we could get into if you have specific use cases. Like we said, we talked about the third-party integrations that we have out of the box. There are privacy signals that we respect out of the box. Custom purposes could be created and applied if you have some use cases like I want to tag things slightly differently in a certain region. I want to tag certain scripts as always blocked, or syncing consent across subdomains, potentially syncing consent across different websites and platforms and devices. There's all sorts of additional use case that we could throw on top, but it doesn't have to be in the out of the box implementation.
Yeah, and only other piece I'll add is when you talk about full stack data regulation, it's all the different company digital infrastructure with your websites, web apps, mobile apps, etc. It's also like consent management is one piece of Transcend's overall product. Transcend's data discovery and DSAR automation are some of the best that I've seen in the industry. And when you regulate traffic in the consent management module of Transcend, it populates throughout your Transcend instance so that you have that same data in data silos, data categorization, and data inventory, processing purposes. It works together in a seamless way that is you otherwise can't get in a solution that might have a green logo and have acquired 10 different companies to just develop their entire market presence. So, well, I don't know who I'm talking about, but maybe somebody else out there might know who I'm talking about.
Shots fired. All right, so without further ado, I guess we can jump into the product itself and kind of talk through that as well. And if questions come up, please shoot them our way. Happy to answer.
Yeah. So yeah, dashboard, like I was saying, get some data about your activity and the opt-in rates and things like this. But this is all, for the most part, aggregated, or it's all aggregated per purposes and region. So I want to touch real quick on the dry stuff and the actual technical implementation phase. Like we said before, the installation of AirGap is extremely simple. It is a one single script with 2 declinations for test and production. Extremely simple. Everything you do in your dashboard requires a publication step where you get to see what changes have been made and what would be going into test or production when you validate those changes. For the most part, you publish regularly, and then you change one setting, and then you see it pop in the diff. We are more fast and loose with our internal instance, and a lot of people are doing a lot of things. But yeah, for the most part, you would just kind of push one setting at a time to keep it clear. I'll touch real quick on the audit trail that would help you actually figure out who has been doing what. That's very good for showing your internal policies and the changes that you've made to your instance at what time, for liability or for just figuring out what changed at what time. And that pairs with actually a deploy history. So of those things that you push into production, all the changes that you make, you can look at these that have been published and potentially roll back some of them. I think I can pretty much keep it as that in terms of technical. We may go, well, I'll introduce this one very quickly. There's also policies. So we'll look in a minute at the triage and associated every network request and every cookie with purposes, whether they're analytics or marketing and things like that, sale of info. Over here, the default that you can set is for the technologies that have not been triaged yet and no purpose has been applied to those technologies, allow them through by default. So, you do need to do triage. Otherwise, we're not going to do regulation. There is the option of switching that policy to just blocking everything that hasn't been approved and triaged, or partially just only block it if the user doesn't provide full consent on your website. This is very good in terms of your desired risk profile and kind of administrative load also of how you want to handle somebody just dropping something new on your website. Do you want full safety and compliance in terms of, we know this is analytics and marketing, so we will allow our users to opt out of it right away, or we'll just block it entirely if somebody didn't provide that triage information. So that's kind of up to you how you want to handle the task of triaging, basically.
This is the stick side of a privacy program, right? Like it's always like, where are the teeth in the organization, right? Mm-hmm. When you're trying to make changes, this is the teeth. This is, if somebody drops a cookie or tracking script on the website that was unauthorized, or just like they're supposed to go through normal channels, they can't collect any like analytics. And it's really funny when somebody comes to you and is like, hey, why is my Hotjar script not collecting anything? Mm-hmm. Like, well, since when have we had Hotjar? So it just doesn't work, and you're able to go through proper channels, and unfortunately sometimes to build some of those habits internally, it requires a little bit more lockdown, and in decentralized organizations that is nearly impossible, which Transcend does allow from that like end user kind of perspective. Now, this shouldn't be the only a way to do it. You definitely should have proper controls in place, but when all else fails, you at least have this safeguard as well.
Yeah, and it depends on the risk profile as well. Like we see some companies that will be okay with just regularly doing the triage and not prevent some of their trackers from functioning by default. But obviously, compliance wise, you're willing to take whatever risk that comes with that. So let me think. I want to show the original experiences next, just so that we can focus on the meat of the triage part just after. And this one is very simple also. So this is the one part that will you can start from the beginning of your integration, and for the most part is not going to require any amount of technical expertise. It's really going to be your compliance policy, and probably your legal and your business teams are going to agree on what the regions you care about and how you want to treat them. And it's all going to happen in the dashboard. So this is a test instance again for which we've set all matter and sorts of regions. It's more streamlined. There is fewer of them by default, but you can create and modify absolutely everything you'd like. So a region would be a name, obviously, a locality, and then you could extend that with languages and time zones if you'd like to have a broader selection for these regions. And then it's quite simple. The things you'll have to select here are whether or not the banner is going to show by default. So it's going to go into that category over here if you need a banner to pop automatically. And then you'll get to decide what type of processing purposes are applicable to that region. Again, over here, we created all sorts of different purposes, but there's only really the main default ones are sale of info, functional, analytics, and advertising. And then you can select whether or not those purposes are opted out by default. So usually in GDPR, you will have all of the purposes apply, all of the purposes are opted out by default, and then a banner shows automatically over here. Yeah. And in terms of banners, there is a repository here that's open source, so that if you wanted to, you could own it and extend it to do exactly what you want. But you'll see there's a lot of configurability or a lot of options for customizations. So those banners over here, let me see. Am I now I'm, there you go. I can switch. These banners, so you have all sorts of them. You have just classic accept all types of buttons. You have just sub categories over here. You have specific opt-outs that you can show, different variations and presentations and things like that. And then you have also the simple notices types of banners and things like this would be a typical CPRA opt-out footer link type of banner, for example. So you can kind of decide what the experience is going to be, and then you get to customize them a little bit. Or pretty much as you'd like. You have CSS configuration over here. You can apply different styles to different banners or just look at the style sheet altogether. And then obviously you might want to change the messaging that are on the banners. So over here, you can also change the texts and the things that are displayed on these banners. Looks like we created a lot of tags over here. Yeah. And so yeah, you can look at what shows in the banners and change those buttons and change those, main description fields and all those things that you want to display on your banners. So I'm zipping through the original experiences. Footer links, same difference. We can share with you an extremely simple snippet so that you can put footer opt-outs on your website. And then we're going to go straight to the fun part of the classification of the data flows and the cookies. So this is what will show on your website when you install our script and we start seeing the traffic happen on it. And you'll see what type of technologies we've found. Some of them are preemptively created by us because we know that if we tell you there are calls made to google.com and you think, okay, this probably pertains of analytics, we do want a special rule to be made for reCAPTCHA, for example, and make sure reCAPTCHA never gets opted out of. That would be troublesome. And then, you get to look at all those things and see, okay, connection is being made to Snapchat and Sentry and Full Story. And we're going to note that these particular APIs from Snapchat are sale of info. If you have full knowledge of, maybe there is a Snapchat dash login or anything that's slightly different over here, you might want to tag that differently. But also, if you think everything Snapchat is sale of info, you can just select them all and mark them all as sale of info. And yeah, we offer you just some tools such as the activity to show you how present this data flow is on your website. The ones at the top are just pretty much running all the time on all the pages. The one at the bottom are extremely rare. And we get some additional information about where we encounter that and when and things like that. And you get to do your triage. And cookie is very similar. It's a list of the cookies that we found, some regular expressions for, the ones that are going to show many times with extremely different, extremely similar names. And then a little further down the line, you'll get explicit, fully named cookies that we found also, and you can classify these separately.
The encounters are really awesome. They tell you can in the developer settings, you can change it from just domain to full page as well. So you're able to see the entire page, the specific page that cookie or data flow is loaded on, and then be able to identify what that's doing. So incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
We're getting close to time here. Anybody that has any questions, please shoot them in the chat. Also, you can reach out to us, obviously, after this. But what are you guys working with customers on the line every day with, migrating them from legacy tools to Transcend? What's the most, are there any common misconceptions, any common questions that come up that we might be able to answer here for some of the people watching?
The biggest thing for me that I hear a lot is the credentialed scanning, because air gap and the Transcend script sits on your web application. Credentialed scanning is done. It becomes part of your trust boundary. For those of you kind of aware, I don't know if that's a commonly used term, but it's part of your trust boundary now. So it's inside your application, which means you don't need to worry about authentication or not. It just works. So I've done full implementation where I don't even have a login to that customer's account. I don't have a login to any of their like authenticated pages. I can still do all the triaging. I could still do all the testing. Like it just works. And that's a big key that OneTrust's implementation around credential scanning is very lackluster, I guess.
Yeah, you'll be able to see what type of technology they're running on the website and how to and classify them based on where their network requests are being made towards. I'll say maybe for testing, you might as best you can see all those pages and make sure you didn't classify something wrong. Probably the better, but it's also something that's very easy to fix. If one day you wake up and some service seems to misbehave, you can go into the console, ask AirGap what is currently blocking, see one of your services in the list of the blocking things, go back to your triage and say, hey, what's going on? This one is actually marked as analytics. It's actually a service that we need, and change that classification, push. No dev work required.
Awesome. Well, if nobody has any questions or anything, we'll give it a minute here. Gentlemen, thank you so much for the time here. We love doing this. So again, if you want to reach out to any of us after the fact, please feel free. We're all on LinkedIn, and we're here to help and hopefully make that migration process a little bit easier for you in the brain, make that a little less stressful.
Yeah, looking forward to find some new folks and start new implementation and get your consent fully implemented in a delightful way.
Awesome. Well, thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate the time. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.
See ya.
Thanks.